Hello and welcome to Building High Performance Cultures, a weekly series where we talk with leaders and culturepreneurs from top organizations about how they've built high performance cultures and how they're leveraging their culture as competitive advantage. I'm Marty Parker, the President and CEO of Waterstone Human Capital, and my guest today is the President and CEO of Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital, Julia Hanigsberg. Julia, welcome to Building High Performance Cultures.
Hi, it's so great to be here.
Great to have you. So just a little bit about Julia. Julia joined Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital in 2015, and the organization has won 2 of its 3 Canada's Most Admired Corporate Culture Awards under Julia's leadership in 2016 and in 2019, and that's of course in addition to their 2013 acknowledgement as well. Now, Julia has spent her entire career in government, post-secondary education, and healthcare as a champion for the cultural transformation, innovation, excellence, and social justice, all noble causes. And prior to joining Holland Bloorview, Julia spent 9 years at Ryerson University during a pivotal time of evolution, including the development of the DMZ, which is a global leader in university-based entrepreneurship, the development of the People First strategy, through which she established the university's inaugural Lead for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And during her time at Ryerson, also championed digital education and access to university for marginalized students. Now, Julia honed her expertise in public policy during her time in the Ontario government, including roles as counsel to the Deputy Attorney General, counsel to the Special Advisor to 2 Secretaries of Cabinet, and Chief of Staff, big job, to the Attorney General of Ontario. Now, Julia, for people who aren't familiar, now that they're a little bit more familiar with you, but aren't that familiar with Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital, tell us a little bit about the organization and the culture you have there.
Thanks so much, Marty, and it's really a pleasure to be with you and have the opportunity to talk about our hospital and our culture. So Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital is a specialty children's hospital. We're an academic health science center. So that means we conduct research and teach the next generation of professionals who are going to care for children. We're a post-acute hospital, so we care for children with disabilities and chronic medical needs and medical complexity. And we do that both through our inpatient hospital wards and our outpatient and ambulatory services. And our vision is the most healthy and meaningful futures for all children, youth, and families. And I think that's kind of a hint to our culture. Our vision for children and families is that they co-create with us what's meaningful to them. We don't tell them what's meaningful. They determine what's meaningful in their lives. And while the children that we serve are complex and some may not have the duration of life that other children will have, every child can have a meaningful and fulfilled life. Our culture is one that is very mission-driven, very value-driven, as you can imagine, given who we serve. And I think that that attribute is really a strength of our organization.
Interesting. Now, Julia, as President and CEO of the organization, what is your role when it comes to culture?
Well, there's, of course, the cliche, which is tone for the top, and I think that's really true. I think that having a CEO who is present in the organization, present with the team, represents the values, the vision, the culture in everything that she does, in my case, I think really sets the tone for the entire organization, that the expectations are that the way I conduct myself, the way I do my work is going to be consistent with who we are as an organization and will be equally consistent with how everyone does their job, whether they're a frontline nurse, whether they're one of our therapeutic clowns making kids laugh, whether they're someone in our human resources area or a finance area, that everyone is going to be embracing those expectations.
Julia, how has the culture at Holland Bloorview evolved since you joined the organization 6 years ago in 2015?
So, I inherited an incredible culture. As you mentioned, we, won our first award from your organization under my predecessor's leadership. And so I definitely, stand on the shoulders of giants. I would say we've become even more focused on quality and excellence even more focused on humility and learning from our mistakes, being a learning culture and a learning organization. We've adopted a safety program called Caring Safely, where our objective is that no harm should come to anyone, staff, client, family member, volunteer, from being at Holland Bloorview. So even more, we're embracing the opportunity that learning from our mistakes provides, and the humility of saying, yeah, we may not get it right, but we're going to learn every time and we're going to get better every single time.
Interesting. Now, you've created an employer brand that is Join a World of Possibility. Tell us a little bit about how that came about and how it's helping you attract and retain talent.
So, like everything we do at Holland Bloorview, we really embrace our internal community. And so in developing that employment brand, the entire employee community was engaged around what resonated for them about their workplace, about working at our hospital, what represented that, what words represented it. And equally, we worked with our family leaders, our, the parents of our clients, our board, and our volunteers. We really wanted to make sure that the employee brand was authentic, wasn't something that felt like it came from some corner office on the top floor, but really felt on the ground in every patient interaction like it represented the experience of working at Holland Bloorview. And that idea of possibility is really embedded in everything we do. So that idea that when you come through the doors of Holland Bloorview, you may not be that hopeful about your future. And what we do is to help you to create that future. And that really is all about a world of possibilities. So for our employees, it's what better opportunity is there in your career than to be part of creating opportunities for young people?
Mm-hmm. And that's a real connection point, I'm sure. And of course, more and more people want to connect to the purpose of an organization and feel like they have impact on what they do. So at Holland Bloorview, how do purpose and culture overlap?
Yeah, I think that's it's a really astute point. And I really see it. I see it especially with the younger generation of employees. They're not just looking for a paycheck. They really want to make sure that what they do is meaningful, impactful, has an impact on the world beyond themselves. And I think that really does, those two ideas, that idea of purpose or vision or mission, those kind of traditional corporate words we use, and culture, they need to come together. They need to feel like they are the same. If your vision statement or if your values are just things that are plaques on the wall that don't live in the everyday experience of the culture, that your employees don't feel in their work every day, that your patients, in our case, don't feel in every interaction with a clinician, then it's not authentic. It's not really these aren't really your values that inspire your culture. And so I think that the key thing is the coming together of values, the coming together of purpose, and the authenticity of those being expressed in your culture. And that means in every moment. It means when you're in the Tim Hortons line. It means when you're interacting in a staircase with one of our environmental services workers who now during COVID are more valuable than ever in keeping us safe. It means in every interaction, you feel that expression of who we are as an organization.
Right. Now, your team has an approach to candidate assessment that's very different from any other healthcare organizations. In fact, organizations, period, I would say. Talk about your recruitment approach and why it's worked.
Well, one of the things that we've developed and have employed at Holland Bloorview that works really well is a set of mini interviews. And, all organizations look to hire for fit, and all organizations are trying to really understand the candidate and their potential. But the problem with hiring for fit is a couple of things. One is it's just hard to do. And secondly, it runs the risk of embedding unconscious bias in your hiring process, because we're not very good at pulling apart fit from someone who's like me. And we know as organizations that care about equity, diversity, and inclusion, that hiring for someone like me is antithetical to creating the kind of diversity we need to be the best organizations we can be. So this mini interview process, what it does is it sets up stations for multiple interviews for the candidate, where they're able through simulation to actually experience what it would be like to work at Holland Bloorview and to have a chance to interact with other members of our team, clients and families. So they participate as part of the simulation. So you're not getting a behavioral question where you're asked, hey, what would you do if you were interacting with a child with a disability like this? You're actually experiencing it and you're demonstrating it. And when you experience and demonstrate it, you both give us an opportunity to really see you in action, and you also test out your own abilities. So we found that to be exceptionally successful at giving us insight into candidates and whether they are the right fit in terms of being the right people to do the work that they need to do at Holland Bloorview.
Yeah, seeing how people do things is different than listening to them tell you how they do things.
Absolutely.
And that's a great example. Julia, how do you cascade culture, or maybe the question should be, or do you cascade culture to external stakeholders like your board, your volunteers, your donors, because your stakeholders actually extend beyond what many other organizations would?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that's interesting for our board, for example, that differentiates them from being a director of another kind of entity is that they not only act in the interest of Holland Bloorview, they act in the public interest. So the cultural piece is really critically important. So there are a few ways. One is that we really invite participation from our family leaders in everything that we do. So people who have lived experience with our hospital, with our services, participate as directors on our board, members of our board committees. They are embedded in our research institute. They are embedded in our structures that hire people, like the CEO on my search committee was one of our family leaders. So that embedding of people who receive our services, I think, is a great way of making sure the culture lives in those external or those stakeholder environments, like at the board, like with your volunteers. The other thing we do is with every onboarding, so whether you're a senior scientist being onboarded or a summer student who's coming to work for 4 months in an internship, part of your orientation is around our culture. It is delivered by members of our family leadership. So you're really, imagine that you're learning from day one the culture of the organization, not from someone like the CEO telling you this is our culture, but from someone who receives services, who's been at that bedside, who's talking to you about the experience of the culture and what that means. And I think that really develops a deeper sense of what our intentions are and what we expect of our entire team.
Very interesting. I also want to hear more about something that I found fascinating when I read about it. And that is, tell us more about the family leadership program and how does it really reflect your culture?
Yeah, it's a really critical part. And I think it's one of our, people ask me sometimes, what's the secret sauce at Holland Bloorview? And family leadership is definitely part of that secret sauce. Mm-hmm. We have extremely committed family leaders. So these are former clients, so now adults who used to be our clients. They're also the parents or caregivers of current or former clients. So they really know firsthand what it is to be cared for by the team at Holland Bloorview. And they are involved in every major decision we make. They're involved in the development of new services and new programs. They're involved in our communications and our marketing and our development of new campaigns. They really are embedded in our work. I'll give you a couple of examples. One is our anti-stigma campaign, which we call Dear Everybody, which is really about demolishing stigma against people with disabilities. And this campaign wasn't developed in, some PR office down, in downtown Toronto. This was really about taking the words and the ideas right from the mouths of the kids who we serve and translating that into a campaign, because we wanted people to hear directly from them. What does the public need to know? So that's one example. Another example is one that I'll draw from the pandemic. And like every business, we have been rapidly having to pivot and change, and decisions were coming flying at us at record speed. And early on in the pandemic, we realized that we weren't incorporating our families into those decisions in the way we typically did because they were so fast. And so we stopped and we said, hey, this isn't us. This isn't who we are fundamentally. We need our family leaders. So we did a call out to our family leadership program, and we said, can we get some family leaders who can commit to rapid turnaround in decisions? That we're going to need an answer within a couple of hours, because that's the pace of COVID. And we were overwhelmed with response, because our family leaders believe in us. They knew it was important. They knew if they were there for us, that we were going to listen. And we had a group of family leaders who were able to do that with us. And to this day, we have two family leaders who are part of our pandemic steering committee. They're there with us side by side as we make decisions to make sure that they are going to work for families and that they take into consideration all of the things that will matter most for children, young people, and their caregivers.
Really interesting that not only did you task them with that, but you tasked them with doing it in a very short period of time.
We did, yeah.
That I think we're going to be talking about COVID time for some time to come, because things do move quickly, even though they feel like they don't sometimes.
That's right.
I know that teaching and learning are truly core to your culture at Holland Bloorview, but how and why are you leveraging learning and development and the programs that you have there to support the growth and development of your teams?
Yeah, it's really in our DNA as an academic health science center. You know, we exist not only to provide care, but we exist in order to make sure that we are teaching the next generation to be supportive of the kind of care that kids like the kids we serve at Holland Bloorview need to have. So it's really a critical part of what we do. And advancing learning and development is part of what we do. Growth is part of what we do. We're not a huge organization. I've got about 1,000 people on my team. So growth and development isn't going to be going through 15 different layers of, VPs, SVPs, and EVPs. It's going to be about developing in your role. And so that's the education we can provide, and that's the learning environment. And that includes really the investment in students. And again, to draw on a pandemic example, how can one resist? Really, these days, it's been investing in the mental health of students. They are, the student experience has been, like everything else, tremendously disrupted by the pandemic. And so helping our students to be resilient, bringing in expertise to help them, really embedding that in part of our student program has been a really important part. And I think something that they'll take with them that will have application very much post-pandemic. We know mental health is so important. I think, if anything, the pandemic has demonstrated it even more so, but it's not something that's going to go away.
No, I agree. And better leaders are going to facilitate an environment which enables better mental health, whether it's by listening, by being more supportive, or just by creating the environment that allows kind of the circumstances of mental health to not be held back like they have been for so many years. And
that's right. And you want to imbue these kinds of things in your students, right? Because your students are your leaders of the future. And for us, our students come from around the globe. So they're not only taking out from Holland Bloorview, they're also taking into their countries and their cultures. And I think that's an incredibly important commitment we have.
For sure. Julia, how has Holland Bloorview fared through the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, so like everyone, it has been a very difficult time. I think the expression many of us have heard and used is we're all in the same ocean, but in different boats. So we are fortunate, I think, to be an organization that had very strong fundamentals going into this. Everything we've been talking about, the strength of our culture, the strength of our values. When people come to work every day at Holland Bloorview, they know why they come through those doors. It's to transform children's lives. And so that deep commitment, I think, helps a lot. But that doesn't mean that our team isn't burnt out and exhausted and that people aren't struggling. We know that's the case. I heard some interesting data not too long ago about the toll on women of the pandemic in particular. And the data is showing that the mental health of women is suffering more even than of men, that mothers in particular are really bearing the burden during the pandemic. I have a workforce that is 85% female. Mm-hmm. So if women are struggling, my workforce is struggling. So, I've got to be honest about that. On the other hand, our team has done an outstanding job. So over the entire pandemic, We've only had 2 patients who've tested positive for COVID, and that's something that we're really proud of. We've had about 26 staff who've tested positive over the course, but we've never had an outbreak. Again, something we're really proud of. And we've been able to do that while maintaining a high level of services. So not by closing things down, but by being really focused on what it takes to keep people safe. So really proud of that. I'd say the other thing that I'm proud of is the degree to which, again, to quote a cliche, we pivoted because of the pandemic. So we had no work from home culture. That had to change rapidly for those who can. So that was put in place. The other thing is we had plans for virtual care. We actually had a virtual care strategy, but we hadn't been doing much virtual care. And to take an example, in April of 2020, we did more virtual care appointments than we'd done in the previous 10 months combined. And it hasn't stopped since then. And that really speaks to the team coming together and just figuring out how to do it. And that included developing virtual clinical interventions that did not exist anywhere in the world. And so those are all things that I'd say, are indications that we're doing well. Our team is working so hard. Like other children's hospitals in our province in Ontario, we are admitting adult patients, which is not our core business. But it's what the system needs. And so we're rolling up our sleeves and doing it. And so the challenges are big. You said it earlier, Marty, this isn't something that's going to go away with the flip of a switch. We're going to be dealing with the repercussions of COVID in the healthcare system for not for weeks or months, but for years. And, for us, it is just so important that we be able to continue to maintain services for the children and youth who need them. It has been a very hard pandemic for children with disabilities and their families. And I think sometimes we don't pay as much attention to the kids as we need to. And so we're going to be working really hard to make sure we do everything in our power to both ensure decision makers know and help us, but also to give kids and their families the services they need.
Yeah, well, what noble work that is. Julia, what have you learned about the Holland Bloorview culture in the last 14 months?
Yeah. What I've learned is that what I thought our culture is exactly what it is. Sometimes you wonder, right? Yet you think you know, but I think you really find out when you're tested, and this has been an extraordinary test. So we are a culture that believes in excellence and speaks truth to power. And I can tell you during wave 1, when I was, rounding on our units, during, on a Sunday night, talking to nurses, they were telling me exactly what they needed, and they were not holding back in sharing with me their frustrations about availability of PPE. Were we making the right decisions? That's a safe culture in healthcare, where your frontline worker will say to the CEO, "I'm not sure you're making the right decisions, Julia. Explain to me why you've decided that." That's really important to safety in a hospital. The degree to which people just are putting one foot in front of the other, whatever we ask of them, they continue to rise. That speaks to our culture, which is about putting the children and families first. And then the degree to which our team has innovated in mental health supports, team supports, putting in place mental health supports for managers, education around mental health support for managers so they can help their own teams. All sorts of coaching for individuals. That also, I think, speaks to our culture, which is one where we care for each other. We truly try to rise together. And so we're watching out. And then the final thing I'll say is this, of course, has been a year not only of the pandemic, but it's been a year that many people have referred to as a year of racial reckoning. Between the murder of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, anti-Asian racism, we've been confronted with many dark truths over the course of these 14 months. And as much as we've been dealing with the pandemic at Holland Bloorview, we've also doubled down on our commitment to anti-racism and anti-oppression. We've created safe space environments for our Asian colleagues to come together and talk about their experiences. Similarly, for our Black colleagues, we've developed a new task force charged with inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So that also speaks to our culture, that we dig into hard things as they're happening, even if they're painful. And that's something I'm also very proud of.
And you should be. Let's look ahead just for a bit. 3, 4, 5 years out, Julia, what do you see as critical to aligning your people to your culture and sustaining this high performance culture that you've built and grown?
Well, I think one thing is never letting up. Our team is not satisfied. They always are pushing to be bigger, to do more, to serve more kids, to serve kids in different populations with different needs, to expand the research. We're right now in the midst of a research expansion that's going to create, when we're finished, the highest concentration of childhood disability research in the globe right here in Ontario at Holland Bloorview. So there's that push to greatness and to excellence. I don't have to drive it. I just have to hold on to the reins and try not to fall off. So these are all really exciting for me. And that's going to be one piece of it for sure. Another piece of it is the equity, diversity, inclusion, entire sense of mission for us, continuing to make sure that we create an even more inclusive culture, bring in new people into our environment. Those are all going to be things that are going to be critical for our success into the future, and I think are going to be things we're going to be working hard on.
I can hear that. Now, development of people and young people has been a big part of the organization and a big part of what you've been around in your life. So let me ask you one final question, and that is, what's the one piece of advice that you give to a young person or a new leader who's just starting out on their own high performance culture journey?
That's such a great question. I always say to young people, when you're starting out, really look for culture. Find a place that is going to value you as a full human being. Find a place where there's alignment between your values and the organization. Often it's less what the business does than how it does it and what it cares about. And if you can find that alignment, then you're going to find a place where you can be successful. So, I really appreciate this focus on culture, because I think sometimes we downplay it. Sometimes we talk about other things, but at the end of the day, finding that cultural fit, that place where you can express your full humanity, create value for the employer at the same time, and learn and develop yourself, that's the magic. That's a place where you're going to build a career.
Yeah, I was given great advice many years ago, and that was pick people, not organizations. And I think if giving that advice today, I'd say exactly what you would say, and that is pick culture, not organizations, which is really the collection of people's behavior that are accepted. And when we talk about that and we look at what Holland Bloorview has been able to accomplish over time, this learning culture and commitment to its leaders, this idea of taking your culture and cascading it out to your stakeholders, which in many cases are far beyond what most of our stakeholders would be. I would say onboarding for culture, a very unique way to assess culture, which is through behavior. It sounds simple, but it's not actually practiced that much. And I'm really taken by the whole idea of what you've accomplished with family leaders. And in fact, one of the things you've said that I think is somewhat underestimated in the public sector is talking about speed, because no longer is it about the big fish eating the little fish. It's really about the fast fish eating the slow fish. And the healthcare community has really teaching us something over the past year. The resources haven't been more substantial. You're doing it with the same people, and you're doing a hell of a lot more. And I'm not saying that isn't really having its toll. I know it is, but we're all extremely fortunate for that nonetheless, and fortunate for many of the things we've learned from you today, Julia. So thank you very much for the time you've taken here on high performance culture, building high performance cultures.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much, Marty.
Great to have you. And thanks again, Julia Hanigsberg of Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital. And join us next week for another episode of Building High Performance Cultures. And in the meantime, if you want to learn more about the subject, go to waterstonehc.com.